Hello and welcome back to Borderland. I'm Brandon and I really love movies, but you know what kind of movies I really love? Movies about movies. And that's why this week we're going to talk about one of the most underrated movies in that genre. A movie that manages to be an homage to William Castle, a period piece about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and a coming-of-age story all rolled into one. That's right, this week we are talking about Joe Dante's 1993 underseen gem, Matinee. We'll be looking at how the movie came to be, everything that makes it wonderful, and its legacy 30 plus years later. Now, Matinee is a movie that I didn't see for the first time until a couple of years ago. At the time, I was laid off and working on a screenplay about kids making a horror movie that I absolutely never finished writing. And I asked a bunch of my friends what their favorite movies about horror movies were, and Matinee came highly recommended. So I put it on knowing only that it was a Joe Dante movie about horror movies, and I was completely blown away by it. It's one of those movies that feels like a long-lost part of my childhood. If I'd seen Matinee alongside stuff like Stand By Me or The Goonies, I think I would hold it in the same regard as both of those movies. Honestly, even now, I still kind of do think it's just as good as those movies. I just haven't seen it nearly as many times. There's just so much about Matinee that works. The setup of a military family being in Key West just in time for the Cuban Missile Crisis, John Goodman as Lawrence Woosley being an obvious stand-in for William Castle. And if you don't know who William Castle was, he was a prolific horror director and producer throughout the 50s and 60s. He's mostly known for movies like House on Haunted Hill, The Tingler, 13 Ghosts, and Homicidal. However, William Castle wasn't just a filmmaker, he was a showman. He pioneered different types of viewing experiences in the theater like Emergo, Percepto, and Illusiono. Really, all these were little gimmicks to be used while the movie was screening. Things like skeletons flying over the crowd, buzzers built into seat cushions, and he even hired nurses to be stationed throughout the theater in case anyone quote-unquote fainted. And Matinee is just a total love letter to this type of theatrical experience, with the movie within the movie Mant using what's billed as atomovision that includes electric sparks, shaking of the building, and of course buzzers in the seat cushions. And before we go any further, just a quick reminder to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video so far. I am a completely independent channel, and if it means anything to you, I don't use any AI in the making of my videos. So with all of that out of the way, I think it's time we dive into how 1993's Matinee came to be.
The story of Mant is based on scientific fact, on theories that have appeared in national magazines.
The origins of Matinee begin with a man named Jericho Stone, a guy I could not find a picture of, but he wrote the original draft for the movie, and according to Joe Dante, it was a very different script from the movie we got. It was more of a fantasy movie where the theater was more of an imaginatory place where the neighborhood kids would pretend that the monsters from the movies were real and hiding around in the theater. However, pretty quickly Charles Haas was brought on board, and he'd already worked with Dante before on the bonkers script for Gremlins 2, the new batch, and Haas's revisions were so great that he actually has sole screenwriting credit on the movie. Although he and Stone do share a story by credit, something that Stone was not too happy about. He actually tried to litigate through the Writers Guild to get co-screenwriting credit, but was unsuccessful because of how different the two drafts of the script actually were. And I have to imagine that Joe Dante had at least a small part in helping Haas with the screenplay, because Matinee plays out as almost a Joe Dante biopic, his version of the Fablemans, if you will. Or wait, is the Fablemans Spielberg's version of Matinee? Either way, my point is that Joe Dante was the same age as the kids in the movie during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and much like the main character of the movie, he was obsessed with monster movies and reading famous monsters of filmland. Dante actually had an article published in Famous Monsters at the age of 15 on the 50 worst horror movies ever made. He has actually since said that he had not even seen all the movies he ranked, which I just think is very funny. As for casting, Simon Fenton beat out hundreds of other kids to be the all-American boy Gene Loomis, which is hilarious considering that Fenton is British. John Goodman and Cathy Moriarty were both cast because, let's face it, they were both big stars at the time. Moriarty had already been nominated for an Oscar for Raging Bull, and John Goodman had already been on Roseanne for 5 full years at this point. There's also Kevin McCarthy, Robert Cornthwaite, and William Shallert, all of whom had appeared in the kinds of 50s sci-fi horror movies that were being parodied parodied in Matinee. Filming began in April of 1992 with a budget of $14 million, and the movie was filmed all around the state of Florida, including Key West, where the movie actually takes place. The movie theater in the movie is a mix of real location and sound stages. The exterior of the theater is actually the Strand Theater in Key West, and the theater actually still stands today, although it has unfortunately been bought by and turned into a Walgreens pharmacy, and that is pretty lame if you ask me. As far as behind the scenes stories from filming, the big one that I found is that about halfway through the filming of Matinee, the company that was financing the movie was forced to file for bankruptcy and close up shop. Now, at this point, Universal had already agreed to distribute the movie, so they'd already invested quite a bit into the production. However, when the original financiers of the movie closed up shop, Dante had to go to Universal and explain the situation and ask them to take over financing for the rest of the shoot, which Universal begrudgingly agreed to do. And on January 29th, 1993, Matinee was released into theaters where it made just $3.6 million against its $14 million budget and placed 6th at the box office behind movies like Aladdin, Scent of a Woman, and Alive. And unfortunately, Matinee would go on to only make a worldwide total of $9.5 million, making it an objective failure for the studio. However, like pretty much every other movie that Joe Dante has ever made, it would go on to find new life on the home video market and become a cult classic for those that did see it. While Matinee may have flopped at the box office, it actually did very well with critics. Even noted villains of my commenters, Siskel and Ebert, both gave it 3.5 out of 4 stars and said that the movie was incredibly fun and joyful. And now, with all of the behind the scenes stuff out of the way, I think it's time we take a dive into 1993's Matinee and everything that makes it wonderful.
Real general wouldn't say that.
Shut up.
I think the most appropriate place to start with talking about what makes this movie wonderful is with its opening scene, which introduces us to John Goodman as Lawrence Woolsey, and he's presenting a trailer for his new motion picture, Mant. This opening sets the perfect tone for the movie and really shows us who Woolsey is as a character. I already mentioned that it's supposed to be a stand-in for William Castle, but what I didn't mention is that prior to filming beginning, Joe Dante went out of his way to compile a dozen-plus trailers featuring William Castle to share with John Goodman for research. And when Goodman was given the compilation, he actually laughed out loud and said that he saw all of Castle's movies in theaters as a kid and he knows exactly how to play him. And he's completely right. He has the right level of charm and showmanship with just a hint of a knowing smile. They even pay a little homage to Castle here with the cigar smoking silhouette. We then pull out to reveal that this is a trailer playing in a movie theater, and we're introduced to Jesse Lee Soffer as Dennis Lumen and Simon Fenton as his older brother, Gene. And I really like this introduction and the way it shows their playful relationship. It's a very sweet big brother, little brother relationship. Gene loves to tease Dennis, but only a little bit, never letting it go too far. As the two brothers walk home from the movie, we get some of the best looking shots of the movie. Matinee was actually shot by John Hora, and it would sadly be his and Joe Dante's final collaboration together after having worked on Explorers and both Gremlins movies together. And I couldn't find anything about why these two stopped working together, so if anyone knows, please let me know in the comments. Once the boys arrive home, we're introduced to Lucinda Jenny as their mom, Anne, and we get a good vibe for the family dynamics here. They're clearly a military family that has been forced to move around with a lot of frequency, and they just moved to Key West within the past few months. And as Dennis sits and is watching TV, President Kennedy cuts through the TV broadcast to tell us all about the Cuban Missile Crisis, which I'm not going to get into the historical side of this movie, but if you don't know what the Cuban Missile Crisis was, it's one of the closest calls we've ever had as far as worldwide nuclear war is concerned. And that sense of uncertainty and dread really permeates throughout the rest of the film and is constantly being felt. In this interview I watched with Joe Dante, he talks about remembering this weekend vividly and thinking that the world was actually going to end because of this, so, you know, some real scary stuff. We then cut to our proper introduction of Woolsey, as well as our introduction of Cathy Moriarty as Ruth Corday, his girlfriend and partner in crime. And the best part of this scene is Woolsey trying to come up with a name for a movie about an alligator man or woman.
She-gator, gator gal, galligator.
Plus, there's also this great moment where the gas station attendant asks for an autograph, only to reveal that he thinks that Woolsey is Alfred Hitchcock.
Thanks, Mr. Hitchcock.
It's then back to Key West as Gene goes to school and we're introduced to Omri Katz, and isn't it crazy that this is only like 6 months before he shot Hocus Pocus, and yet he looks like 5 years older in that movie? Also, Joe Dante had already worked with Katz a few years earlier when he directed 5 episodes of the TV show Erie, Indiana, which Katz actually starred in. Anyway, Gene inadvertently starts to make friends at school, only because the kids at school know his dad's in the Navy and they think he might have intel on what's actually going on. And they invite Gene to eat lunch with them, which leads to this great moment of the previous military kid being turned away from the table. And I really love this face that Gene makes when the kids at the table start talking about monster movies. It's so clear that he's excited to hear them talking about something that he actually cares about, and it's clear that he never really gets to talk about his passion for monster movies. Later on, while at school, we also get this nuclear bomb drill that introduces us to Lisa Jakub as Sandra, and she's yelling about how ducking and covering won't actually save anyone from anything, and I mean, she's not wrong. Later that night, Gene takes Dennis to go see Shook Up Shopping Cart, which, fun fact, gives us the film debut of Naomi Watts. But I like that this movie is supposed to be a play on stuff like Son of Flubber or The Shaggy Dog, the stuff that Disney was making at the time. The best part of this sequence, though, is after the movie when Gene and Dennis go outside and see 2 men protesting the upcoming premiere of Woolsey's new movie, Mant. And the protesters are played by the late great Dick Miller and John Sayles, both of whom have a long track record of working with Dante, and who should walk up to this little protest but Woolsey himself. And this whole scene is so well done. It's this great little back and forth that sees Woolsey giving out free passes to the premiere for Saturday afternoon, and Gene and Dennis get their free tickets. We then cut to this great scene of Gene reading Famous Monsters magazine in his room alone, and fun fact, this issue right here actually features that article by 15-year-old Joe Dante that I mentioned earlier. There's also this great little scene between Omri Katz's Stan and Kelly Martin's Sherry, where Sherry tells Stan all about her delinquent ex-boyfriend, and it's a very 60s-esque setup of the good girl with the bad boy ex-boyfriend, and who should be watching them but the ex-boyfriend himself, Harvey Starkweather. What a name. I also love the movie's use of "My boyfriend's back" here.
My boyfriend's back and you're gonna be in trouble.
After school that day, Harvey actually confronts Stan and tells him that his date with Sherry is canceled, and he has to make up a reason to give her, and him calling Sherry to cancel is a great, cute little moment as well. While Stan is dealing with Harvey and Sherry, Gene runs into Woolsey and tells him that he actually recognized the 2 protesters from the night before, since they had previously been in other movies that Woolsey had produced. And the 2 hit it off and begin a nice little friendship. We're also introduced to Howard, the theater manager, who was played by longtime Dante collaborator Robert Picardo, and his portable radio that he keeps on the news at full volume at all times, and the great running bit of Woolsey grabbing it out of his pocket and turning it off. I also love this little bit of Woolsey and his crew hooking up the motors to the seats to buzz them during the movie, which is an exact bit that William Castle used for his movie The Tingler. Later that night, Harvey finds himself at a bar and runs into Dick Miller and John Sayles and attempts to steal one of their wallets, only for them to catch him and mess with him immediately. And I like that it ends with them telling him to go straight and get a real job because he's clearly bad at being a criminal. Cut to him in an ant costume backstage at the theater, now ready to work for Woolsey as part of the Atomo-Vision that Mant is to be presented in. And finally, the next morning, it's time for the world premiere of Mant. And I mean, how can you not love everything about the last act of this movie? We immediately get Howard's doomsday bunker set up for us, Sherry seeing Stan in line and being mad at him for canceling their date and lying to her, Gene and Dennis having to sign waivers with Ruth, who tells them,
"It's not a joke. We've had 10-year-old kids having heart attacks at this movie."
Also, all of the movie posters you see in the lobby of the theater are for real movies from the era that actually played at the Strand Theater. Gene runs into Sandra while looking at this cool little statuette thing, and I like that Sandra's parents are kind of new agey without being hippies. Honestly, they feel like they're from a completely different time period to me, but that kind of makes them all the more fun. So Sandra decides to sit with Gene and Dennis, and just before the movie begins, we get one little scene with Woolsey and Harvey, and Woolsey is running through all the different cues at lightning pace, and I like how obvious it is that Harvey is scared and overwhelmed by all of this. As far as the movie Mant is concerned, I mean, this is just a blast of a movie within a movie. It pays homage to the movies it's spoofing, and like I said, it even features several actors who worked on movies like this in the 50s and 60s. My favorite bit being anytime this scientist guy uses a bigger word, he also defines it in the same sentence.
You'll continue to metamorphose. or change.
And I could go on and on about Mant, but let's just say that it's a blast. And yes, I did watch the 20-minute version of Mant that exists, and it rocks. After the movie starts, Stan comes to Gene and asks for his help with Sherry. And the way that Gene spins this yarn about Stan promising to take Dennis to the movie because Stan is basically a second older brother to Dennis is great. Some excellent wingman moves right here. Unfortunately, this leads to Sherry and Stan making out during the movie, and when Harvey sees this in his ant suit, he gets real mad and punches both Stan and Woolsey and ends up chasing Stan down to Howard's bunker. The shot of Stan grabbing and pointing the shotgun at Harvey is also great. Mr. Cool Guy here blows on the barrel like he actually did anything. As Harvey runs away, Gene, Sandra, and Sherry come into the basement and find Stan, and the four immediately start checking out Howard's bunker, and of course, Gene accidentally starts the automatic timer, and while Sherry and Stan make it out of the bunker before the door closes, Sandra and Gene end up trapped inside, and because of the out-of-control atomovision shaking the theater violently, the two pretty quickly become convinced that nuclear war has broken out, and they are alone and trapped. However, back in the theater, Dennis realizes that his brother's been gone for quite a while and starts to get scared, so he goes and calls his mom and tells her to come down to the theater, where she immediately runs into both Dennis and Stan, who explains the situation, which Sandra's parents also happen to overhear. So Dennis goes to the balcony to finish watching the movie, while the rest of the group rush to the basement, where Woolsey is working on taking off the door to the bunker, and I really like how when Howard tells him that the bunker is impenetrable, he laughs and says,
Boy, am I in the wrong business.
And the door of the bunker coming off is one of the great moments of the movie. We've got Sandra and Gene making out, and then the door comes down and Sandra's mom goes from worried to "what are you doing?" real fast. Gene's mom goes from being relieved that he's okay to instantly pissed that he left his brother alone at a scary movie. Meanwhile, as Mant reaches its conclusion, Harvey rushes out into the audience one final time in his ant costume and grabs Ruth as part of the show. Unfortunately, he also holds a knife to her throat, which is not part of the show. Backstage, he demands that Woolsey give him the money that the movie has made and that Sherry come with him. So Harvey takes off with Sherry and Stan rushes after them. Gene and Woolsey stay behind and notice that the balcony is going to cave at any minute and try and shut down all of the electronics and other equipment that's part of the show. Which leads to probably the best joke in the movie, which is Mant ending with a faux nuclear explosion that sends the entire crowd rushing out of the theater and into the beautiful day, where they quickly realize the world hasn't ended and that it was all just part of the movie.
Man, I'm seeing this twice.
Unfortunately, the stampede out of the theater leads to the balcony finally collapsing, but oh no, Dennis is still up there, so Gene gets to be the hero and save his little brother, and outside, Harvey tries to make his getaway in Woolsey's car, only to immediately crash into a truck and have Sherry run away from him and straight into Stan's arms. And at the end of the day, the premiere for Mant appears to have been a massive success, and Woolsey is able to secure its placement in several other theaters, and later that night, it's revealed that the Cuban Missile Crisis is over, and the movie ends with Gene and Sandra seeing Woolsey and Ruth off in their brand new blue convertible, and I like that the movie ends with Woolsey saying he might want to have kids because he likes Gene and Sandra so much. Finally, Jerry Goldsmith's excellent score plays us out. And I mean, what can I say about Goldsmith and Dante working together? The two just completely understood exactly how to work together and make pure gold. So 30 plus years later, what is the legacy of Matinee? Well, unfortunately, I think it's more or less forgotten. It's not a movie you hear get brought up very often, although Shout Factory did just issue it on 4K last year, and it seems to have done pretty well through that release and label. But this is one of those movies that if you've seen it, you probably have some fondness for it. Even if you don't think it's the best movie ever made, at the very least, you'll think it's pretty cute. Realistically, I think that Matinee's legacy really boils down to being a love letter to a bygone era of the theatrical experience, where there was more of a focus on showmanship and more of an emphasis on live theater and live theatrical tricks. As far as where Matinee sits in Joe Dante's filmography, I think it's going to rank in different spaces for different people, but personally, I'd rank it pretty high. Certainly above The Howling, and maybe even my beloved Small Soldiers. Honestly, it feels like it could fit right in between Gremlins and Gremlins 2 for me. Maybe. I don't know. Don't make me choose. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you for watching. It truly means the world. And before we go, as always, an extra special thank you to all of my supporters over on Patreon. You all make these videos possible. If you'd like to join the Born to Rant Patreon, there's a link in the description below. Patrons get to help me choose what videos to cover on the channel, access to an exclusive Discord server, and early access to new videos. And just another reminder that Born to Rant is a completely independent channel, and I use no AI in the making of my video. We release new videos covering all of your childhood favorites every Thursday morning at 7 a.m. Pacific time. So please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.